know Hudson Mohawke as being one half of Tonight, the Wonky electronic duo that were a bit more significant in the early 2010s. They had that EP and then sort of went very quiet for a while. Quite a weird way to, you know, burst onto the scene with a pretty significant release and then not do anything for a while. But we have seen them come back, I think it was last year, with another release which I didn't like at all. So going into this Hudson Mohawke solo release, solo album, I was pretty interested to see where he'd take his direction, because he's actually dropped 2 albums this past month, but I am only reviewing the more recent one, which came out at the end of August. And honestly, it might be equally as wacky as the album cover itself, because we're just getting some absolute slapping, banging, wonky tunes here, and it's as much as you could ask for from an artist like this in this kind of genre, really. It's very much what you've heard before, especially if you've listened to this style of music in the past. I was certainly reminded of plenty of different artists over the years that have been doing this sound, but it is important to remember that Hudson was really at the forefront back in the day. Like, you know, you could say, oh, he sounds like this, but you know, Tonight were really kind of ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. Not the first artist to ever do it, but they certainly managed to fine-tune their style and create pretty memorable bangers. He's going all out with this, so the opening track sounds straight up like chipmunks being thrown into a blender. Honestly, the chiptune voice that's being like clattered together and being hammered in your ears could easily get irritating as hell, which usually does for me, but somehow it actually sounds really sick, so I'm kind of cool with it. Need You Here is more of the extravagant, glitzy, like high class type of wonky music that you would certainly hear on artists like, you know, Rusty, for example, some of his work. The bombastic nature of this track, though, reminds me actually a lot more of the latest Bauer album, which was a great listen, still a banging listen, one of my favorite albums of the year easily, and that's from the guy who made Harlem Shake. So, you know, these artists in this genre, they got bangers, man. The album quickly starts showing off and flexing its diversity when you hit tracks like Hands of Time, which is a much more soulful type track. It's got a bit of like this jazzy edge to it. I love the vocal sample that comes through. It just reminds me of something that Kanye would have done back in like the early days, something on the College Dropout or Late Registration. And then the instrumental itself is just straight up out of a Roots album. Like, seriously, it's a great way of showing how he can make these kind of like hip hop leaning beats, and rappers should be looking at Hudson and using him as a producer on their albums if he can do beats as good as this. The blingy production is really awe-inspiring on the track Vitalise. Again, it's got that glitziness to it, just really extravagant sounding stuff here, and of course he just adds his own edge to it, his own spin to it, by making the tracks just slap in your face at the same time. Behind the Frozen Waterfall is a very different track, as this one is just so beautiful in the way that the twinkling melody just matches the chaos that he manages to just throw into his songs. But like the melody he conjures up on this one is just gorgeous. Vitalise has this really like booming boom, 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 boom at the start of the track, which honestly does start to get a bit irritating as it goes along. Luckily though, it progresses into something that you would hear on Rusty's Glass Swords, which is really cool. But the booming, you know, part of the track does get a bit irritating. It actually sounds like something Run the Jewels would rap over. I'm just waiting for LP's voice to just sharply come on this beat. Sadly, I would say there are a few lulls, particularly after Behind the Frozen Waterfall, where some of the tracks don't really strike me in the same way as I'd hoped they would. The Hoiarp, Hoiarp track, not really big on this one. I think the melody on this track is actually just a bit sour. Like, there isn't anything that really catches my attention on this one. Like, by the time it's done, I struggle to remember what this track even sounds like, which might be a bit of a cliche thing for a reviewer or a critic to say, but that is weird on this album, where there is just this one moment where I genuinely struggle to point out something about the song that's really stand out, because so much of this album is so high energy and in your face, but this one just doesn't have that. Foam Finger has that same like extravagance in the production, the glitziness that I keep talking about on some of these tracks, you know, the glamour edge to it, which I really like on the tracks that I've highlighted throughout this review. But this track kind of feels like a B-Tech version of the ones that he did it really well on. I don't know, it's a bit odd, but it just doesn't really hit me in the same way. Maybe it's that it's been done too many times, so it gets a bit predictable by the time it hits this one. That could be it, but not really one that I'd call a major highlight, sadly. And as diverse as this album can be, I guess it is a bit predictable in the way that it's structured. You know, you can kind of follow the pattern of many of these tracks, which I think my favorite artists or albums in this style tend to be a bit more unpredictable and a bit more chaotic, like that Bauer album that came out this year, really. The unpredictable edge that I'm looking for does finally come in that last song though, because this is just some really weird nightcore type stuff that only 100 gecs would be dreaming of doing. It's absolutely bonkers, and I just love how the album ends on this. Like, I just cannot believe nothing else on this album tries to do this, and then right at the end he just throws it out there because why not? And that's probably something he could have made use of throughout the album, maybe just random moments where they hit this weird chaos out of nowhere. I think that would have actually improved the album a little bit. But you know what, as you know, I may be pointing out some critiques here and there, this album's actually really good. It's definitely something that I think you should be checking out, especially if you've been a fan of artists in the Wonky genre for like however many years now. And the thing is that Hudson Mohawke doesn't really seem to have that same staying power as he used to back in the day, so this is actually a nice return to form, I think, if you just want to try some of his stuff, because it's definitely getting a bit overlooked. So yeah, really good. I think a 7 out of 10 is certainly a fair score that I can go with. Hopefully you like it as much as I do if you listen to it. Let me know in the comments if you have heard it already. Thank you for watching this review. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell. Have a good day and goodbye.